Hello, it's time for video 1B. This video is about the midpoint formula. I'm Mr. Miller, and I hope you're doing great today. Let's get rolling here. So, first we're going to talk the midpoint of line segments. We're going to talk about one dimension. So here on this number line here, we have two numbers plotted in blue, 4 and 16. And the instructions are find the average of the two numbers and plot it as well. So, okay, let's do that. Let me find my pen here. So we have 4 plus 16. We're going to add them and divide by 2 to find the average. So 4 plus 16 is 20. And 20 divided by 2 is 10. So we're going to plot the average right here. And when we plot the average of the two numbers, we see that we get the point that's exactly halfway in the middle. So if I want to know the number that's halfway in between 4 and 16, I can just take the average. Okay, got kind of bigger numbers here. So same thing, we're going to find the average and plot it. So we're going to do 32 plus 60 and divide that by 2. So remember, we got to simplify the numerator first. So if you're doing this on a calculator, you do 32 plus 60 and hit equals, and then divide by 2. All right, so 32 plus 60 is 92. And if we divide that by 2, we get 46. So we're going to plot 46. And sure enough, that's halfway in between these 2 points. Okay, well, this can help us to find the midpoint of a segment. So this is really the same idea. This time we have a segment. One endpoint is at 24, and one endpoint is at 36. And our direction is to find the midpoint. All right, just from looking at it, it looks like it's 30. But let's find it by finding an average. So we're going to do 24 plus 36 divided by 2. And that would be 60 divided by 2. And sure enough, it's what I thought. It's 30. I don't want to be able to do this without a graph. So that's why I want to learn how to do it with averages. Okay, let's do this one. To find the midpoint, we're going to do 3 plus 8 divided by 2, which is 11 over 2. It's a decimal this time, but that's fine. 5.5. If we graph 5.5, sure enough, it's the midpoint of the segment. So if we have a segment in one dimension, we just take the average of the endpoints. All right, but we want to up this a little bit. What about a segment in 2 dimensions? Okay, well, let's take a look at what's going on here. It's still related to averages. In fact, we're going to need 2 averages. So this endpoint is located at the coordinates 2, 3. And this endpoint is at 8, 5. And this blue dot right here is the midpoint, and we see its coordinates are 5, 4. So I want to kind of think, how do we get 5, 4 from the 2 endpoints? Well, take a look at this diagram here. This is the same segment. The first endpoint has an x-coordinate of 2. The second endpoint has an x-coordinate of 8. The midpoint, its x-coordinate is halfway in between those. So in order to find the x-coordinate of the midpoint, we have to take an average. So we take the x-coordinate of the first endpoint plus the x-coordinate of the second endpoint and divide by 2, and we get 10 over 2, which is 5. All right, so the x-coordinate of this is the average of those 2 x-coordinates. All right, let's take a look in the y direction right here. So this endpoint has a y-coordinate 3. This endpoint has a y-coordinate 5. The midpoint should have a y-coordinate that's halfway in between those 2 numbers. So again, we can get that by taking the average. 5 plus 3 divided by 2 is 8 divided by 2, which is 4. Sure enough, it's 4. So we get that the midpoint should be located at 5, 4, which is what we said it should be. All right, so what this diagram illustrates is that the x-coordinate of the midpoint is the average of the x-coordinates of the endpoints, and the y-coordinate is the average of the y-coordinates. All right, so that's what the midpoint formula says. So the midpoint formula looks a little abstract. It's got all these x1s and x2s and y1s and y2s, but all it is an average. This is the average of the x's, and this is the average of the y's. All right, so let's give it a try. We want to find the midpoint of these 2 points. Okay, So we add the x's and divide by 2. 6 is the x coordinate of the first point. 10 is the x coordinate of the second point. So you do 6 plus 10 divided by 2. I'm using this formula here. Add the x's and divide by 2. Then we're going to add the y's and divide by 2. This is the y coordinate of the first point. Plus, this is the y coordinate of the second point. Divided by 2. Alright, 6 plus 10 is 16. Divided by 2 is 8. I think 15 plus 29 is 44. Divided by 2 is 22. We have the midpoint. Okay, let me do this one. So this is x1, this is x2. Add those and divide by 2. This is y1, this is y2. Add them and divide by 2. So we have 55 divided by 2, which is 27.5, I believe. And 9 plus 17 is 26, divided by 2 is 13. So I hope I'm doing that right there. I forgot my calculator. All right. So negative numbers, we do the same thing. Just don't drop the negative. So on this one, we're going to add the x's and divide by 2. Negative 8 plus 4 over 2. And then 2 plus negative 6. So we add whatever we have. We have a 2 and a negative 6. So we add them and divide by 2. All right. That's going to give me negative 4. Divided by 2 is negative 2. And 2 plus negative 4 is, 2 plus negative 6 is negative 4. Divided by 2 is negative 2. So the point halfway in between those 2 points is negative 2, negative 2. All right. We've come to our last example here. We're not quite ready for the journal assignment. So this is kind of a very similar problem. We're given the points in a graph. So instead of just giving the coordinates of the points, we kind of read the coordinates from the graph here. So this point right here is negative 4, positive 2. And this point is 5, negative 4. All right, to find the midpoint, now that I have the coordinates, I can do exactly what I was doing before. Negative 4 plus 5 over 2. Add the x's and divide by 2. Then add the y's and divide by 2. So that's going to be 1 over 2, which is a half, or 0.5. And 2 plus negative 4 is negative 2. Divided by 2 is negative 1. So 1/2 negative 1 is right here. And sure enough, that's exactly in the middle. Okay, so I hope you're very familiar with the midpoint formula now. That was a quick introduction to it. Basically, just got to get used to applying it and you'll be fine. All right, so here's your journal assignment. So label the assignment as video 1B. So when I look in your journal, I can tell which assignment it is. And we got 3 short problems here. Find the midpoint of these 2 points. And part B, you got 2 different points to find the midpoint of. And just like the last example I did, find the coordinates of this line segment and use the midpoint formula again. All right, I think you got it. Take care.